right, guys, so as to be expected, absolutely nothing there but exhibition pieces. And when it comes to the exhibition pieces, a lot of GMTs. I mean, almost like double of everything. I don't know, maybe that's a really popular model here. I mean, I know it is, but we always think of the Daytona, which I think is overrated. I mean, maybe the world, or at least the Japanese, have come to their senses and have realized that when it comes to the modern pieces, the GMT really is the best. I think there's a lot of bang for a buck there. It can do pretty much anything the sub can do, except, of course, go as deep or time a dive or have a unidirectional bezel. But does anybody use a sub for that these days? Probably not. And the sub can be a little bit cliche. So talked with a guy and just chit-chatted a bit. Will they participate in the CPO program? He doesn't know yet. I think the chain of command goes Rolex, SA Geneva, and then Rolex Japan, and then all these shops and stores and department stores and whatnot. So Rolex Japan hasn't decided yet, but from what I understand, Tokyo authorized dealers are moving to bigger locations, which, why would you need to do that? It's not like you need the stock space, but that could mean, you know, the CPO program is going to happen. I guess we'll just have to see. The only thing else I asked him about was the 50 millimeter deep sea challenge that hasn't come here in terms of the exhibition model. And in terms of the GMT, the Japanese, according to him, tend to like the Jubilee bracelet GMTs more. And I think I do too. I think I love both, but I think the Jubilee is just beautiful, comfortable, and that's my favorite. Here I am in the city of Fukuoka in an area called Tenjin, and this is the hospital where my oldest daughter, Sarah, came into the world. And I remember standing up in one of those windows, holding her, looking out over this grassy area, thinking about the future, thinking about who the hell this little human I was holding was. And turns out she is absolutely amazing, as is her sister Sophie. Neo-vintage and vintage watches, let's check some out. This is a two-tone sub. It's an X serial from 1991. It's got an oyster bracelet. Now this is a tritium watch, so I would be concerned that it's been serviced and perhaps the hands have been changed out. So I would make sure that all of the tritium is there. If so, this is a full set. This is a pretty good price and a beautiful watch, and a nice alternative to a bluesy. It doesn't quite stand out as much, and that can be a good thing. Black and gold work really well together. I'd also make sure that the pip on the bezel insert is tritium as well. This Explorer 1016 has some beautiful patina, and the Explorer line came out proper in 1953. That's when they first started putting Explorer on the dial. Now the 1016 came out in the late 1950s, and there are quite a few variations in terms of the dial, but it started out with a gilt dial, and they seem to think this is a Mark I. I don't know if that's saying that this is like the first dial version, but it seems to have white writing, and that's later. Now another difference that they go back and forth with within the 1016 line is the shape of the coronet. You've got the frog foot shape and the more normal shape, and we couldn't have worse hand placement to check that, but this looks to be a frog foot coronet. So I would say this is probably like a third or fourth version of the 1016. It's kind of interesting, within the 1016 line, the Holy Grail isn't even an Explorer, it's a Space Dweller. They were apparently released in Japan, and talk about unicorn pieces. A Space Dweller or this, which would you rather have? That's a tough question. I know which I'd rather have on my wrist. This is a beautiful watch. This is a red sub. It's the very first date sub. They came out in the late 1960s, and they first came out with Submariner written in red, and within those red subs there are some dial variations, and eventually the Submariner text became white. I love the open 9s and open 6s on the date wheel and the lack of gold surrounds, but that insert is almost certainly a service insert. A surprisingly affordable option in this case, a 1983 date just. Interesting dial. Now is this a Lennon dial? I might be wrong there, but it's got a unique dial, whatever it is. A pre-ceramic Kermit. What's in a name, Shakespeare? I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you what's in a number, specifically that Fat 4 on the bezel insert, about $10,000. That's the difference between a Fat 4 and a regular Kermit. Here's a pricey GMT 16700, the last of the GMTs where you couldn't separate the 24-hour hand and the local hour hand. This is an early 1990s piece. It's a tritium dialed watch. I'd make sure that those hands are tritium as well. They look to be, but they look a little lighter, so they might have been replaced at some point. A Tritium Explorer 2, and shops here are starting to put a premium on tritium. The tritium on the dial and hands of this watch are even and uniform. It started to patina a little bit. It's got that eggshell look to it. Looks like that Cyclops is sleeping on the job. This is a 36mm Explorer. It's a tritium piece as well. They list it as a 1997 watch, but T serials are from 1996, and it went T serials and then after T's U's, and it was during the U serial that they switched over to Luminova. A tritium bluesy sub, and all the tritium pieces have hollow and link bracelets, and if it's a steel piece, that's not that big of a deal, but on the two-tone pieces, they don't put gold in the clasp, so that's kind of a downside. You get less precious metal, but hey, your clasp won't scratch as much. This is a pretty nice date sub. Looks like the tritium is all intact on the dial and the hands and even the pip, and that looks like an original bezel insert. Look at the fat 4 at 40. This is a watch only 14060, no date sub. It's a tritium piece. You'll have to excuse the shaking in the video because I was suffering from PTSD because, like my T serial from 1996, this watch has a replacement insert. Look at the pip. That's a Luminova pip, and that 4, the horror. Oh, and that ain't rain, man. Those are tears. Well, check this out, guys. For $750 USD, I can make the pain go away. I'm just waiting to hear if my health insurance will cover it or not. And we wind our way back to the Kermit. We're not done yet. Let's check out some Daytonas. This is a pre-ceramic Daytona black dial. Now this would have the Zenith movement in it. It's an A serial from 2000. It's got a lot of documentation. This could be a Patrizzi dial, and that's when the subdials started to brown, and a collector named Patrizzi identified that flaw that ended up becoming collectible. Okay, my bias against diamonds is getting ready to show. Trigger warning. What's one way to ruin a Daytona? Put diamonds on it. Now don't get me wrong, I wouldn't kick it out of bed for ticking, just diamonds aren't my thing. Just like that diamond dial Daytona, this has the Zenith movement. You can tell because the running seconds are on the left subdial. Whereas on this piece with the in-house movement, the running seconds are at the bottom subdial, and also the indices are different as well. Now, I love meteorite dial watches. I think they're kind of cool, but the Romans and the coloring of the hands kind of ruins it for me on this piece. And for the Omega fans out there, my favorite, or one of my favorite modern Omegas. I think this is a beautiful watch, and it seems like a bargain basement buy compared to some of those Rolex watches. I don't know how I feel about the false patina, but it's okay. I could get over it. But I love that second hand. Absolutely love it. Let me know which pieces you liked. For me, it would be one of those GMTs or that Kermit. You gotta love a Fat 4 Kermit. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.